Today on the news and why it matters, Boris Johnson landslide over in the UK, what that might mean for Democrats here in the United States. Also, the Judiciary Committee has approved articles of impeachment. Oh boy, oh man, can't wait to get into all of that. Also, a 14-year-old who was beaten for being a Trump supporter. Got a lot to get into on this Friday, and it starts right now. Welcome to the news and why it matters. I am Sarah Gonzalez, today joined by Stu Burgier, Pat Gray, and Jason Buttrill. That's a
all-star team.
Amazing lineup. Oh man, I am super excited. Just kidding. I am excited. I realized that was offensive. Sorry about that.
You said you were super excited. Just kidding. That means you weren't excited.
But I said it in a sarcastic way, so I was just kidding for the sarcasm.
And is that sarcastic, what you're saying?
No, it's genuine. Right. Before we get into the program, I would just like to point out that Jason Buttrill is wearing sweatpants.
No.
Jason, who so kindly jumped in at the last minute, was like, I'm wearing a sweatpants and a hoodie today. Are you sure you want me on the show? So he's wearing a TV mullet today on the program. So Boris,
I stepped up, is what you're trying to say. I stepped up.
Totally. Boris Johnson's Conservative Party wins the majority in the UK election. We've talked about all of this in regards to what's going on in the UK and how Jeremy Corbyn, who was, of course, his opponent, a little anti-Semitic.
A tad.
A little bit.
A shade of not really liking Jews.
Yeah. Yeah.
A dash right on top.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. But there are a couple other, I think, parallels, similarities to what's going on in the UK with, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party over there, and then what's going on here with Democrats and Republicans. Stu, do you think that this should be any sort of sign for the United States, just how the tides are turning?
I think there are some pretty interesting things to learn from this. We talked to Daniel Hannan this morning he's a representative to the EU from Great Britain. And, Pat, it's been 10 years since that first phone call with him that we had.
Wow.
From when he made that big speech initially. And in that conversation, he talked about, we really need to get out of the EU. The EU is a disaster and we should pull out of it. And at the time, it seemed like completely crazy. I remember 3 years ago talking to him again, and he said, it's Brexit. Congratulations, Daniel. He's like, yeah, there's a lot of work to do. And now here it finally seems like, and I'm not walking across the finish line yet with this one, but it finally seems like next month they're going to actually get Brexit done, which is pretty impressive. And I think it shows, I think, a couple of things for when it comes to relating to the United States. Number one, if you are the Democrats, you have to be terrified by running a far left candidate. Corbyn is to the left of any of the candidates, really, that we are running, even Sanders. But he's their version of really super far left-wing Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. And there's enough people in the country that were just like, no. Frankly, no. I can't go that far. Even if I'm moderate to left-leaning, this is nuts. So you run a candidate like that, you risk the same thing happening where with a big conservative victory here, just like there was there. Secondarily, I think there's an aspect of this when it's about honoring an election result, right? In 2016, Donald Trump was elected. That has not been cool with the Democrats. They have not been confident to allow that process to play out and have another election. And they've been trying to overturn that result in different ways ever since. And what we saw in Britain was the same thing. The Brexit vote came down. Everybody tried to overturn it. Every opposition party tried to overturn it and screw with it the whole time. And even people at the end who were Remain voters came out and said, look, I got to get this thing over with. I don't like the result, but this is what the people said. Honor it. I think that's a big part of it. And with Boris Johnson, too, there's a part of it where he is a similar figure to Trump in that he can cut through the normal politics. So he's a personality. A lot of people like his personality. It's a little bit different than Trump's. It's a little bit more, maybe more endearing than aggressive. But it's still out of the norm for politicians. And because that cuts through, I think there's a lot of voters who, personality-wise, just like him enough to do it. those three ingredients could spell disaster particularly if they pick the wrong candidate on the left. I don't care. I hope they do. But it is one of those things where if I'm a Democrat today, I'm freaking out over that result.
Yeah. There is some very strong parallels because when Brexit, the referendum was 2016, before our election.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, I don't know, maybe you guys do, what the media's perception of that was, if that was just kind of like a fluke, or if maybe the U.S. might mirror some of that. I don't think so, because
I know there was a big thing that Trump tried to play up at that time, was to say, look what happened in Brexit, it's going to happen here too. And the media definitely didn't believe it.
No, they didn't. And you'd get your blue check marks, you get all your media personalities. Everybody in the mainstream media was agreeing, like, okay, that's nothing, don't worry about it, we're going to sweep this election, Hillary's going to win with 99% of the vote. That was the same exact thing you saw during the referendum. Every blue check mark and media personality over there and over here was saying that the referendum was going to get destroyed. Why? Because we're saying so. Because we all say so.
And we really want it.
Yeah, and we really want it. But of course, we had the referendum. Trump wins. That's really kind of breaks out all over the world, and and you see it now. It's almost like I guess it's a revolt over like the world as it was probably like around the 90s. And that was a big technocratic leader, rise, where it was like, okay, you idiots down there, don't worry about it because we're going to take care of you because we know better than you do how to run your country and how to live your lives. That's the liberal left, the progressives in this country. It's the same over there, over in Europe. And people are sick of it. They're tired of being called uneducated just because they didn't go to Oxford or they didn't go to Cambridge or they didn't go to Harvard or Yale over here. They're tired of being called uneducated over that. And they know how, they're smarter than the people that sit, whether it's in Brussels or London or Washington, D.C., they know how to run their lives and their families better than they do. And they're sick and tired of being told that they're uneducated for believing that and for knowing what's best for them. And I think that this is just going to break out even more. I think you'll see this. I think Glenn even asked Daniel if he thought that France might be next on this list. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see that.
He said he thought it might be the Netherlands, actually, next.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, I mean, obviously the Conservative Party in the UK is not what we would call conservative. So there's still differences. Yeah. But I still think, Pat, the fact remains, the people are tired of, government thinking that they know better than the voters.
Well, yeah, there were districts, there were areas of the country that turned red for the first time in 100 years.
Wow.
100 years that were going conservative. And so, it's a little bit different, but still, there was a definite mandate for Boris Johnson and Brexit. And, again, I go back to what Glenn was saying during Obama's reign of terror. Because of his, his slick Marxism, Glenn thought that the next leader was going to be somebody with a gravy stain on their shirt. Well, Boris Johnson is definitely that, and so is Donald Trump. They're both gravy stain guys.
I saw a great breakdown from John Oliver about Boris Johnson, and he was making the case, and this might be right, that Boris Johnson's kind of like gravy stain persona and disheveled look was very calculated on his end, because he said everyone took it for granted. They underestimated the guy. So they'd go into some of these like debates, or
just like Democrats underestimate Trump.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So here in the United States, of course, they had the articles of impeachment vote to get it out of the House Judiciary Committee. No surprise there that they all were like, yeah, let's do it, based on absolutely no evidence. But interesting little tidbit from yesterday's dog and pony show. I don't know what else to call it. I don't really feel like it was a hearing. It was 14 hours of just them going back and forth on something that we knew they were just going to vote to take to the floor anyway. So it was Representative Escobar and also Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee just blatantly saying Trump said something that he did not actually say. So I think we have a video of Representative Escobar saying that Trump said, "I want you to do me a favor." There's just one problem with that, though. Watch.
Our Republican colleagues are working overtime to try to convince us that we didn't see what we saw with our own eyes and we didn't hear what we heard with our own ears. Let's bring it down to an example that was used during the hearing. If a governor, if a community suffers a natural disaster and the governor of the state has aid that will help that community, but calls the mayor of your community and says, I want you to do me a favor, though, and conditions with giving the aid to the community on the police chief smearing his political opponent, has there been a crime? The answer is yes. And that governor would go to jail.
So there's just one slight problem with what she said. The quote was, I'd like you to do me a favor, though, is that that's not what Trump actually said. He said, I would like for you to do us a favor. Now, that changes things, in my opinion. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, in the same vein, said, he said, I want you to do a favor. She just completely took out the us or the me. Just do a favor.
That's because she can't speak the English language.
Probably that might be part of it. But Donald Trump struck back on Twitter, of course, of all places, and said, Dems Veronica Escobar and Jackson Lee purposely misquoted my call. I said, I want you to do us, in parentheses, our country a favor, not me a favor. They know that, but decided to lie in order to make a fraudulent point. Very sad. I mean, it does make a difference, does it not? If the entire argument, which he hasn't always really voiced so well, if the entire argument is this is in our national interest, it makes a big difference to say, do us a favor or do me a favor. Right, Pat?
Absolutely. Absolutely it does. Plus the analogy is just stupid.
Yeah, it was really stupid.
It didn't even make any... It wouldn't be like a governor telling a local community leader.
No.
It'd be like somebody in Canada telling them to do a favor for them. The whole thing is just ridiculous. And they know they've got nothing. And Nancy Pelosi essentially admitted that yesterday when they asked her, hey, what happened to bribery charges? Where's that?
Well, she's not a lawyer.
No, she's not a lawyer, and her lawyers advised her not to use bribery, which tells you what? They didn't have a bribery case. That's what it tells you. I mean, it's like, your prosecutors going after somebody for murder, but they wind up charging him with jaywalking. Well, our lawyer said, go with the jaywalking charge, not the murder. Okay, I'm not a lawyer, but we went with jaywalking instead.
That's right. And that was not, I think in that little press conference, Nancy Pelosi tried to be so cute about it.
She did.
Yeah, she said, well, I'm not a lawyer, even though I act like one sometimes. I also act like a doctor sometimes, but it was very bizarre.
So
I'm like,
weird.
Just stop talking, Nancy.
I will think I did actually learn something on this last clip, which was that Veronica Escobar is a congressperson and actually a person at all.
I actually forgot. You notice I said Representative Escobar because I was like, I don't remember her first name yet. Oh, there it is. Trump tweeted it. Trump tweeted it. That's how I remember.
Yeah, I've literally never even seen the person before. It's amazing to me how there's so many representatives out there that make absolutely no impact outside of where, I guess their district or whatever. They just go along with the flow. They never really say anything interesting, and the rest of the country doesn't know who they are. I have to say Escobar has fallen into that category, sadly for me. I don't know anything about her, but that is obviously a ridiculous analogy, and it is important because that, it is the fundamental part here. If Donald Trump was doing this for his own political benefit solely, again, that's really the standard is solely, like Nixon is going to, the Watergate situation is done on behalf of him, though, for his political benefit. There was no argument that, for the good of the country, we just had to make sure that those things in that hotel room were, there's no argument there. And that's why he was burned so badly with that, and it was so obvious. Same thing, you look at Clinton, too. He's using the power of his office to hide an affair and then lying about it. This is something where he's doing this, we know that there's a real benefit to the country here. There's $8 billion missing. Well, let's find out where it is.
Mm-hmm. Jason, Jerry Nadler said today is a solemn and sad day.
Oh, God, this act is
third time in a little over a century and a half, the House Judiciary Committee has voted articles of impeachment against the president. He was very, very sad about it.
Solomon said, weren't they watching golf all of a sudden?
I actually like that guy. Whoever that guy is, the guy's watching the golf tournament on his laptop. I was like, I respect him. That's what I would be doing in there, too. We all know this is a show. You might as well watch a better show.
The two articles, the more you look at it, the more you realize this is not going anywhere. And what scares me is that McConnell's comments lately about just kind of going with what the White House is. If the White House doesn't want to call any witnesses, we're not going to do anything basically and vote on this thing and just move on. I think that would be a catastrophe. I want all of this to be exposed in the Senate. The Federalist Papers actually lay out what happens if this is used for political bias, which this is. It's Federalist 65 if you want to read it. I don't think anybody in Congress has ever read Federalist 65. But they actually, it's almost a direct quote. They're like, this will be used for political bias. That's why it should start in the House. They will undoubtedly use this as a political weapon. That's why it should go to the Senate. And it's very clear. They're like, it shouldn't go to the Supreme Court because of this. It should go to the Senate because of this, because the Senate will act as okay, let's really get down to the nitty gritty of all the different charges. And when they do, the obstruction of Congress, that's dead on arrival. That's not going to happen. That's already been reaffirmed by both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. Yeah. That's not going anywhere.
Previous administrations. Yeah.
It's not going anywhere. And then the abuse of power, they've got to prove his intent. And you can see just from that tweet right there, he's already getting ready for that. His lawyers have prepped him for that. All they have to say is don't step out of line here. Make sure that the intent is for the good of the country, not yourself, and this is done. Yeah. They know this.
All right, back in a minute.
She should have been saying from the beginning.
Yes. 100%. Yes.
A 14-year-old boy was hospitalized last month. This happened last month after being beaten by multiple other children on the bus on his ride home from school. Now, this video has just surfaced because the family's attorney said that it is now okay to release the video. I'm just going to go ahead and warn you guys, if you have children, younger folks in the room, it's pretty graphic, but the 14-year-old boy was voicing his support for Donald Trump and was wearing one of those evil red hats. And apparently this is what happens to you in America in 2019 if you dare wear a red hat. Again, this is a little bit graphic if you have little ones in the room.
Jeez, 4 people?
What wild animal. What is that? Gosh, that's unbelievable.
I mean, that's what you just said. It's like it's like an animal, right?
Yep.
It's incredible. So apparently there is an investigation going on, and like I said, the family is being represented by an attorney, looking into this. But the school said, well, all the students face discipline. I got some discipline. It's fine. I'm pretty sure they need a rear whooping. But so the parents tweeted out after the attack, sitting in the hospital with my 14-year-old kid because he was just jumped by 8 black kids on the school bus. I guess that's what happens when a kid wears a Trump hat to school. Earlier today, they poured milk all over his head. This is depressing, Sto.
I would agree with that. I will be seeing, I think, this kid at the State of the Union in the crowd in a couple of months.
Which would also be depressing.
Yeah,
We're not supposed to exploit the children.
No, I think it's going to be one of those things where he's like, hey, Trump loves this, right?
Yes.
Like, you stand up for him and you get your butt kicked because of it. Like,
he doesn't love kids getting their butts kicked.
No, he likes the kid who stood up for him and was willing to get his butt kicked for him. But yeah, I mean, this is look. There's always been fights at school, and we're catching them more on video now. And
it's not a fight, though.
That's just really disturbing.
That's attacking a kid for wearing a MAGA hat.
I got into a lot of fights in school. Surprise, surprise. And they were never over politics. No. Not a single one of them was about frickin' politics.
Really yeah.
And I'm going to blame both the boy's parents and the parents of everybody beating on the boy. Like, there's no reason why your 10-year-old should show up all politicized out.
Well, he was 14.
That's stupid. You can't, whatever. But even still, even less so, because now you're starting to realize, hey, those chicks are kind of cute. I'm more into politics. Come on, man.
I'm sorry, you can't find cute chicks who are into politics?
Very true. Very true. 100%.
You just don't. You should not even notice they're into politics. You're like, hey, she's really cute. Well, she believes what? Who cares? But there's no reason why our kid. And something I've noticed as my teenagers are now in school, they talk about politics all the time. Ugh. And when my kids started, I'm like, shut up, stop. You should not be worried about this. You should not care about this.
Oh, I remember back in 5th grade when I was yelling at some kid that No, Gerald Ford doesn't trip nearly to make it out on TV. He doesn't trip that much. And we got into just a brutal, savage brawl. It's ugly.
But on the other side, I just want to say on the other side, though, all these other kids that were getting all violent, it's the same thing. They're getting this from their parents. They're getting it from their parents. They're getting it from social media and all that stuff, and they're soaking it up, and then they're taking it to school. And it's just absolutely ridiculous how politicized we've become.
It's difficult for, I think, kids to pick up the nuance from the overall conversation. And the overall conversation is that Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler, and he hates all black people and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, like...
also, you should be attacking, well, not attacking. What did Maxine Waters say? You should be confronting Donald Trump supporters in the streets.
Wherever he is, yeah. If you see these people in the streets, go up to him. Yeah, I mean, so I just feel like there is that level of penetration of politics into our kids' lives is really unhealthy. I think it's been something that has been encouraged by mostly the left, though not entirely the left. I mean, I go back to Rock the Vote all the time. I mean, there was a time where it was like, we have to encourage people to get more involved in politics because they're not thinking, young people need to be thinking about it. It's like, well, maybe they don't. Like, maybe they need to be thinking about the issues. Maybe you need to talk to them about the issues. But this has turned into just a personality battle, right? Like, the idea that you go beat the crap out of somebody because they're wearing a hat is not a rational way to think about the world. But if it was, Adolf Hitler's hat, like, maybe the kid does get his ass beat. And that's the type of thing where we're at a situation where, like, there's an understanding, I think, among adults where we're like, okay, you're calling him Hitler. We all know the people on the left are nuts, and they don't necessarily mean he's actually Hitler. They're just trying to say the worst possible thing about them. And it goes on both sides with that. Here, though, kids don't pick up that nuance. I mean, they just see it as, like, you're evil if you're wearing that hat. And they can't separate it. They don't have the ability to put that added context on there. And I think this sort of stuff will happen more. I don't want my kids involved in it.
Yeah, they're seeing Time Magazine call out a 16-year-old for her political activism for crying out loud. So now of course you're gonna have more 14, 15, 16-year-olds like, that's me. I want to be Greta for crying out loud.
Oh God, please stay in school, kids. Back in a minute.
I do not want an activist kid. I'll tell you that.
Oh my God.
I want a kid who's well-rounded, who
Hey, for those of you who may be watching on YouTube, Facebook, wherever the case may be, you're missing out on Overtime. There's a little program that happens after we finish this called Overtime. And today we're going to be talking about Hunter Biden and the fact that because of his whole, oops, I knocked up a stripper bit, who among us does that not happen to? But because of that, he may have to reveal...
been there. We've all been there.
He may have to reveal his full Burisma and China earnings in that lawsuit. We will get into the details of that. Also, there is a gay Jesus Christmas flick. Thank you. Finally, they did it. We've been asking for it, and finally they did it on Netflix. We'll get into that. Also, Rudolph, the movie Rudolph, queerest holiday special ever. Come on, this is going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
All right, you got to tune in at BlazeTV.com.
What a gay Christmas topics you picked.